The crimson sands of North Prime whispered across shattered armor and bones long stripped of memory. Jagged metal ribs of downed spacecraft jutted from the dunes like the skeletons of ancient beasts, their hulls still humming with residual static from the planetary EMP strike weeks ago. Nothing grew here. Nothing moved except the wind and one solitary man. Kael Renner moved with the wary patience of a man who had survived too many battles. His breathing was slow, matched to the rhythm of the gusts. Every footfall left a ghost print on the powdery grit that swirled around the dead remains of what had once been an advanced communications outpost. Now it was a graveyard, both for machines and for decisions better left unspoken. The Mark 7 sniper harness clung to his spine like a second skin, each microservo compensating against the shifting gravity wells beneath North's fractured tectonics. His visor scanned for thermal traces, life signatures, or signs of remaining hostiles. Nothing. Again. He wasn't supposed to be here. The mission had ended successfully, but something kept him close to this cursed sector. Something about the silence here felt unfinished. A flicker. His optics caught a brief pulse, a heat signature buried beneath collapsed ferrocrete. Weak. Fading. Definitely organic. He should have logged it and called in Helix Division for recovery. Protocol dictated minimal exposure to compromised alien sites. But Kael had never been good at protocol. Drawing his sidearm, he stalked forward, adjusting the angle of approach to avoid casting a shadow. The signal came from inside what had once been a subterranean command bunker, now mostly collapsed. A jagged rift yawned near the center, formed by an energy discharge or perhaps a plasma cannon strike. Either way, unstable. Kael dropped into the crevice with practiced grace, landing amid wires that hissed with defiant sparks. A low groan echoed female pained. Not human. He saw her then. Curled amid twisted alloy was a figure wrapped in broken armor and singed black cloth. Her skin shimmered in the dim light, blue, almost metallic, like living mercury. Her hair was streaked with silver threads and clung to the side of her face, matted with sweat and blood. Her breathing was shallow, eyes barely open, irises glowing a faint amber hue. Elirasan. Kael recognized the species Aryan. Genetically engineered centuries ago to serve as tactical advisors for the Virex Dominion. Agile, brilliant, cold. She should have been dead. Maybe she already was. Yet as he knelt beside her, she stirred a twitch in her fingers, a faint intake of breath when his shadow fell across her. Burn marks ran along her left side, and her abdomen bore the unmistakable puncture wound of a shrapnel impact. But no weapon lay in her reach, no threat, no defiance, just eyes too tired to hate but still refusing to beg. Kael hesitated. The Aryans had ambushed his squad 2 weeks earlier. 3 of his unit didn't make it back. He had every reason to leave her here to rot beneath the ruin of her own war machine. And yet, he reached for his emergency med patch. The moment he touched her skin, his fingers recoiled. It was too hot, unnaturally so. Not fever. Something else. A feedback loop in her biology. He pressed the patch anyway, watching as the biofoam spread into the wound, hissing as it sealed against her alien flesh. Her eyes opened wider now, still dazed, still unsure. Kael didn't speak. He knew better. Some species interpreted human language as aggression when injured. Instead, he scanned the chamber. No other survivors, just her, and the unmistakable scent of ionized blood and scorched circuitry. Her gaze tracked his movement now. Not hostile, not afraid, just watchful. She didn't speak either. He moved to lift her slow and steady. She didn't resist. She couldn't. Yet her hand twitched, barely brushing his armored forearm, a gesture that might have meant anything or nothing. Kael didn't know why he cared. She weighed less than expected, her frame deceptively delicate beneath layers of burnt armor and torn synth cloth. As he hoisted her over one shoulder, her fingers curled slightly against his chest plate, as if reflexively seeking warmth or stability. As they emerged into the dying sunlight, Kael could hear the static crackle of distant comms traffic. The Helix dropship would be there in 10 minutes. He activated his link. Extraction needed. 1 package. Organic. Injured. Confirm identity. The reply crackled. He looked down at the alien woman cradled in his arms. Her eyes met his with something between resignation and curiosity. Her lips moved slightly, forming words in a language that flickered through his translator in incomplete fragments. The only intelligible phrase, "Why help me?" Kael didn't answer. He just adjusted his grip and kept walking. The wind picked up again, whispering across their backs. Somewhere behind them, the ruins of war settled into stillness once more. And ahead, the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. But it was alive, it was breathing, and it had just begun. The storm broke just as they crossed the ridge. North Prime's atmosphere was never stable, but this was worse than usual. Static lightning surged across the horizon in jagged arcs, ionizing the air and turning the sky a bruised green. Sand lifted in howling sheets, pummeling Kael's armor with the fury of a planet that had never forgiven its invaders. The Helix dropship never arrived, or perhaps it had Kael's comms unit was fried within minutes, reduced to a buzzing loop of unintelligible noise. No extraction, no orders, no backup. Just him, the storm, and the alien woman barely conscious against his chest. He found shelter in what had once been a transport maintenance bay, a hollowed-out skeleton of a structure half swallowed by dunes. The reinforced walls still held, though the ceiling sagged in warning. Inside, it was dark, warm, and mercifully quiet. For now. He laid her down on a folded tarp near the back corner, stripping away what remained of her fractured armor. Her wounds weren't just external. Her bioluminescent veins pulsed irregularly, sign of circulatory disruption or internal power system overload. Arians were hybrids, organic minds meshed with reactive neural mesh. Damage like this could kill her in hours or shut down her motor functions permanently. Kael did what he could. His medkit was a human one, coded to Terran biology, but he improvised. Pressure foam, coolant gel to draw out energy surges, a field IV rig modified with a drip adapter. She flinched once when he touched her ribs. Her eyes fluttered focused, then closed again. He hadn't spoken since the storm began. She broke the silence first. A quiet hum, a note sustained through gritted teeth. Not quite a word more, a signal. Curious. Tuning. He looked at her. Don't try to move, not yet. She didn't understand the words, but something in his tone translated. Illyra's breath slowed. Her fingers twitched beside the IV tube, almost tracing the air as if feeling for energy currents she could no longer command. Kael sat down beside her, finally allowing the weight of his rifle to rest against the wall. His limbs ached. His head buzzed. But his thoughts kept circling the same question. Why had he helped her? It wasn't pity. She was a soldier, just like him. And if the tables were turned, she probably would have left his body in the dirt. Probably. He reached into his ration pack, tearing open a self-heating protein strip. The smell filled the chamber, smoky, synthetic, and unmistakably Terran. She stirred at the scent nose, wrinkling. Kael raised an eyebrow. You hungry? She blinked, then cautiously nodded once. He broke the strip in half and handed her the smaller piece. Her fingers brushed his as she took it cold to the touch, despite the fever. Her hands were elegant, long-jointed, with a faint shimmer beneath the skin, like a second light trapped inside. She chewed slowly, suspiciously, but finished it. Then she did something unexpected. She handed back the wrapper. Kael laughed, not loud. Just a low exhale that surprised even him. Really polite alien. Illyra tilted her head slightly at the tone. Maybe not understanding the words, but catching the inflection. Her lips twitched at the corner. A ghost of a smile. The wind howled outside, but inside the shelter something had shifted, imperceptible but real. He moved closer to check her vitals. Her temperature was stabilizing. The glow in her veins had softened to a steady pulse. She met his eyes. Not pleading, not afraid, just watching. She pointed slowly at his chest unit, then at herself. A question. He tapped the insignia on his armor. Helix Division. She repeated the motion on her chest. Her fingers brushed the torn edge of her own symbol, Virex Dominion, the enemy. And yet, they sat together now, not as soldiers, but as survivors. He reached over, tapped the wall beside her. Neutral ground. Her eyes narrowed, then nodded. For an hour, they said nothing more. Kael dozed lightly, rifle across his lap, every instinct still primed for betrayal. But the attack never came. Instead, when he woke, he found her asleep, one hand curled loosely toward his, the fingers resting inches away. He didn't move. The storm passed during the night. The silence that followed was deeper than before, charged somehow like the air before a sniper's shot. Kael stood and scanned the horizon through a broken viewport. Still no signals, still no extraction. But now, not alone. He turned back. She was awake, watching him. Kael slung his rifle across his back and extended a hand. Her eyes flicked from his palm to his face. No translator, no words, just trust. After a long moment, Illyra reached up and took it. Together, they stepped out into the dust and ruin, and walked. One step, then another, toward what they did not know. But the moment had been forged a silent alliance. Fragile, unlikely, and impossible. The winds of North Prime had carved labyrinths through the sediment and scrap. Kael and Aelira moved cautiously through them, two shadows in a world long stripped of light. Every few kilometers, they paused beneath rusted struts or collapsed relay towers. Aelira leaning against the metal, while Kael recalibrated bearings with what little of the HUD still functioned. He no longer checked for extraction signals. The static was constant now. The network was gone, or perhaps something larger had buried it. They needed shelter, real shelter, and something more than ration foam and half-dead biofilters. The land rose ahead in jagged black spires, natural basalt fused with artificial alloy. The scanners labeled it as no signal zone, which for Helix Division usually meant abandoned alien technology or unclassified anomalies. Either way, it was better than another night under the open sky. They reached the cliff face just before nightfall. Behind a rust-caked hatch embedded in the rock was a stairwell, not crumbled, not corroded, protected, inexplicably intact. The air that drifted out carried the tang of ozone and biofilament decay. Alien. Ancient. Kael led with the rifle. Aelira followed, still weak but growing stronger each day. Her breathing was steadier now, her movements sharper. The way her eyes scanned the walls hinted at recognition or something older, deeper. Memory etched into her blood. They descended through 5 levels of catwalks and spirals before arriving at a chamber that defied explanation. It pulsed. That was the only word Kael could find. The walls were lined with crystal-veined conduits glowing in a rhythm that matched no known tech. The central structure resembled a sarcophagus suspended mid-air, its sides splitting open slowly like petals in reverse. From within came a warm, bioluminescent glow, and a scent clean like rain and ozone and memory. Aelira froze. Her eyes widened not with fear but recognition. She approached the core on instinct alone, her palm raised and trembling. The glow intensified. A resonance field activated, humming in low oscillations. Kael's visor went dead. His rifle clicked useless. Every electronic system dropped into blackout. Only their bodies responded. He tried to step forward, warn her maybe, but the light engulfed them both, and the world changed. Sudden stillness, then pain not sharp but deep, like something being unraveled and rewoven all at once. Kael fell to his knees. Inside his skull, something stirred. Not a voice, more like an impression. Shapes. Memories not his own. Thoughts in a cadence he didn't understand but felt. Warmth, confusion, fear. Then, understanding. Aelira was kneeling beside him, her skin glowing with threads of silver that moved beneath the surface like living circuits. Her eyes met his, and they weren't just her eyes anymore. He saw himself reflected inside them, saw her seeing him. Resonance achieved. The words came from nowhere and everywhere, not spoken but injected directly into consciousness. Kael staggered upright. Aelira rose too, her movements now perfectly synchronized with his. They turned at the same moment, breathed in tandem. Every heartbeat echoed as one. The chamber pulsed again. A second structure unfolded similar to the first, but lined with organic material and what appeared to be a suspended neural matrix. Aelira moved toward it. Kael followed without needing to understand why. There was no command, no suggestion, just necessity. The chamber accepted them both. Inside it was neither warm nor cold, only enveloping. A cradle of light and fluid, weightless and infinite. Wires slithered across Kael's back, integrating with his spinal interface. Biolocks opened in his armor, inviting the system inward. Aelira's breath hitched beside him as her body was likewise claimed by the machine, not in invasion, but in welcome. Her eyes fluttered shut, lips parting slightly, as if surrendering to a language older than memory. Then it began. The interface stitched their minds together, not simply as a connection, but as a fusion. Kael felt her presence flood into him like light through stained glass. Elegant, calculated, but laced with a surprising depth of vulnerability. He tasted her fear, her strength, the weight of exile she had carried since being left for dead. In return, she felt his loss, his loyalty. The ghosts he still carried from missions no one ever talked about. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Emotions flowed in waves: curiosity, anger, protectiveness, and something else. Heat. A charge. It wasn't sexual, not yet, but it carried the weight of bodies pressed together, of skin remembered in battle proximity. His mind burned with the imprint of her touch on the medkit, her breath against his throat on the second night in the wreckage, the way her eyes lingered when she thought he didn't notice. Then the chamber responded. It pulsed harder now and injected something into the fluid. Nanites, bioagents, genetic triggers. Kael felt his own cellular structure twist slightly, not painfully but dramatically, and Elira's body trembled in time. The interface announced one-word synchronization. Light surged. Their eyes opened as one, and in that instant Kael knew. They were bonded. Not in a human sense, not in any way the Helix Division manual would recognize, but in a biological, neurological, metaphysical reality that had redefined the very core of who they were. Their minds were one continuum. Their bodies, though, still separate, now responded to stimuli across the bond. Pain, fear, desire, instinct, all now shared. As the chamber opened, releasing them onto the cold alloy floor, Kael gasped. Elira did too, but they didn't look at each other in confusion. They understood. They had become something more. Something neither side of this war had ever imagined possible, and something both would likely fear. The resonance chamber faded behind them, the soft pulsing of its ancient lights now a memory imprinted in both of their bodies. As Kael and Elira stepped into the corridors of the forgotten installation, their movements were no longer two sets of footsteps, echoing down metal floors. They were a rhythm, seamless, reactive, preordained. They could feel each other not in words or thoughts, but in shifts of breath and the pulse behind every decision. When Kael's hand tightened on his rifle, Elira's stance adjusted without thought. When Elira scanned the corner of a branching hallway, Kael's trigger finger relaxed by instinct. The transformation was invisible from the outside, but inside it was total. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The facility around them had changed too. What had once been dormant now stirred, responding to their bond. Old walls flickered with bioluminescent glyphs illuminating the way forward. Doors that should have been rusted shut now opened with a hiss of recognition. This place was no mere ruin. It had been waiting, and they had activated it. Security systems buzzed with restored energy. Kael could feel them shapes in the dark mechanical minds snapping awake after millennia of silence. Elira sensed them too, but not with fear. Her link to the system had deepened through the resonance. She could hear the pulse beneath the metal. "They know we're here," Kael said, finally breaking the silence. She nodded. They both reached for their weapons at the same time. The first drones came from above ancient constructs of obsidian alloy and spinning plasma cores, descending like steel angels from shattered ceilings. Kael's rifle rose before the first had finished deploying. His shot passed through the core of one, ricocheted into the joint of a second, and dropped a third via rebound, without needing to aim again. 3 shots, 3 kills. Elira didn't blink. She was already moving, leaping onto a dislodged support beam, and launching into a spinning kick that crushed a drone's stabilizer wing. Her hand flared with light as her biosuit responded to the bond, channeling energy from the installation itself into a pulse that fried the next 2 attackers mid-air. They fought like they had trained together for years. But this wasn't training. It was fusion. They swept through the corridor, clearing room after room. Drones fell in clusters, unable to adapt fast enough. Kael saw angles he shouldn't have been able to calculate, shots that arced off surfaces, that bent around obstacles, that found targets before his scope registered them. Elira fought with fluid elegance, each strike augmented by Kael's grounding presence in her mind. She wasn't reacting, she was anticipating. Moving ahead of enemy AI with a grace born not of her own training but of Kael's battlefield instincts flowing through their shared link. Between battles, the silence hummed with tension, not fear, hunger. Each time their shoulders brushed, or when Kael's fingers briefly closed around her wrist to steady her through a collapsing floor panel, their bond surged hot, sharp electric. It wasn't just connection. It was pressure compressed between action and restraint, forming something volatile and new. And neither of them could stop it. They reached the central tower by nightfall. It rose through the facility like a spike into the core of the planet, wrapped in cascading code and singing wires. From its apex came the pulse, slow, powerful, planetary. This was what had reactivated the drones. This was the source. "Power node," Kael murmured, reading the symbols as they scrolled across his HUD. No, Elira answered for the first time in hours. "It's worse." She placed her palm to a console. The glyphs responded instantly, shifting into 3-dimensional projections. What unfolded was not a power grid. It was a network interconnected across systems spanning planetary relays, some even touching deep space beacons, long thought inactive. This was not just a defense facility. It was part of something larger, something ancient. Great filter architecture, she whispered, translating aloud for Kael's sake. Dormant structures built to prevent civilizations from evolving beyond a certain point. Kael studied the visual. You mean, like a test? No, she said, her tone grim. A trap. The bond between them quivered with urgency. Whatever was happening, their presence here had accelerated it. The facility had detected the resonance human and Aryan mind linked in synthesis and decided now was the moment to awaken. In the tower's heart, a pulse began to climb. Kael's targeting display flared red. The fusion core was destabilizing. We've got maybe 30 minutes, he said, already calibrating angles, looking for weak points. I can take the shot. It's shielded, she replied, her eyes glowing. Temporal distortion fields. Any automated weapon will fail. Good thing I'm not automated. Their eyes met. Kael stepped into the chamber, every muscle tensed, every breath aligned with hers. She moved to his side, fingers hovering over the auxiliary controls. She didn't need to say what they both felt. This wasn't just another mission. It was their first trial together. They had become a unit of war, not by training or order, but by bond. They had unlocked a pattern the ancients hadn't predicted, and now the galaxy would have to make space for something new. Kael steadied his breath. Illyra synced hers with it. He placed his finger on the trigger, and together they did the impossible. Again. The blast echo traced a perfect spiral through the air, curling around the quantum distortion like a comet's tail. The bullet, fired from a weapon centuries out of date, held in the hands of a human with no business in this war, slipped through folded time and struck the node's singularity core with absolute precision. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then the facility screamed. It wasn't a sound exactly. More like a pressure wave made of memory and warning, a last broadcast from a long-dead civilization realizing too late that it had been bested. The pulse collapsed inward. The tower's conduits flickered, died, surged again before going dark in totality. Kael remained motionless, eyes fixed on the now silent core. Illyra stood beside him, body still humming from the neural feedback of their bond. Her skin glowed faintly where her fingers had brushed the resonance panel. Inside her, the ancient architecture of the Aryan bioframe flickered in unstable loops, but none of it overrode the warmth in her chest. The echo of Kael's thoughts layered beneath her own. He'd done it. They had done it. She felt it now without looking, the way his pulse had synced with hers during the final second, the way his breath hitched just slightly when her concentration deepened through their link. This had not been mere instinct. It had been unity. And now something far worse approached. From above, through fractured skylights and rusted hatches, came the shrill buzz of atmospheric pressure shifts. Mercenaries, gunships, sensors blinking to life. The Virex Dominion had noticed the collapse, and they were coming. Kael didn't hesitate. He slung his rifle, grabbed the auxiliary plasma cutter from the wall, and turned toward the primary descent shaft. We've got 15 minutes before this place gets repurposed into a tomb. Illyra was already moving, boots hitting the floor in perfect rhythm with his. As they descended, the facility shifted again, not destabilizing, but watching. Panels lit behind them, scanning their biometrics. Defense turrets activated not against them, but toward the rising enemy forces trying to breach the upper levels. For a moment, Kael felt something strange, like approval. Then came the sound of boots. Not one pair, not 10, hundreds. The Blackfire Syndicate had arrived in force, hired guns loyal to no banner, but wealth flooding the access tunnels with autoloaders and close-quarters rigs. A lesser team might have fallen back, surrendered the core. But Kael wasn't wired for surrender, and neither was Illyra anymore. The moment the Syndicate breached the inner chamber, the hybrid unit struck. Kael fired first one shot down a curved pipe off a reflective panel, straight through the visor of a Syndicate captain mid-command. Before the body hit the ground, Illyra dropped into a slide, her legs sweeping beneath the next gunner, while her hand flared with charged resonance that disrupted the mercenaries' internal systems. She didn't stop, neither did he. They weaved between the mercenaries like dancers inside a metronome of violence. Kael's shots found heart spines, exposed circuitry. Illyra's strikes targeted nerves, pressure points, subtle energy flows that collapsed armor from within. There were moments, microseconds, where she knew where his shoulder would be, where he knew she would be in his blind spot, where neither had to think to protect the other. Their bond translated into motion, into war. And it was war. But it was beautiful. For the first time in Kael's life, he wasn't just surviving. He was alive. Not fighting alone, not shouldering the mission with a silent trigger and a half-eaten ration bar. This was shared purpose, and Illyra felt it too. She had been bred to serve algorithms, taught to trust command lines and social orders encoded in genetic ambition. But now inside this chaos, beside this impossible human, she felt choice. They fell back toward the last corridor as reinforcements surged forward. The odds were brutal now, 3-1, then 5-1, but the facility responded. Glyphs on the wall pulsed, and then something rose from beneath the floor. A new weapon. It didn't look like anything Kael recognized. A rifle, yes, but alive. Veins of light running through it shaped for both Aryan and human grip. The system had built it for them. Kael reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the hybrid barrel, it sang, and in the next 10 seconds he rewrote the balance of power. Every shot from the rifle curved split echoed. The air shimmered with soundless pulses as Syndicate forces dropped before they could react. The gun didn't follow his orders, it anticipated them. Each twitch of his thought rippled down the trigger. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a language. Illyra's eyes widened. She could feel it too. The gun was part of the resonance field connected to their shared nervous systems. Every kill added to its memory. Every success deepened its bond. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The Syndicate broke, retreated, vanished into the storm they'd once ridden. When the silence returned, Kael let the rifle lower slowly, breathing hard. Illyra approached and placed a hand on the weapon, not to take it, but to understand it. Her touch shimmered across the alloy. "It's alive," she whispered, not with her lips, but through the link. Kael nodded, his body aching in a dozen places, but still humming with adrenaline. He turned to her. She was close, closer than she had ever been. Her eyes didn't glow from alien systems anymore. They glowed from knowing. And inside Kael something shifted. There was more to this than survival now. More than war. More than ancient trials. What they had triggered together had never been about weapons. It had been about evolution, and they had passed the test. Together. The aftermath was not silence, it was resonance. The facility's internal systems had stabilized, yet the tower still pulsed slow and deep like a resting heart. Illyra stood at the center of it now, one hand over her abdomen as if to steady herself. Not out of fatigue, not even injury, but from certainty. Kael didn't ask. He didn't need to. The bond had evolved. What had begun as a mind link through alien architecture had grown into something richer, something cellular, something generational. She turned toward him slowly, amber eyes soft in a way that made the ancient alloy walls around them seem almost warm. Her lips didn't move, but her thoughts brushed his consciousness like a breeze through firelight. "It's real." Kael's breath caught. His fingers curled involuntarily around the hybrid rifle as if needing something physical to steady the truth now blossoming between them. She was carrying life. Their life. Not just a pregnancy, not just a cross-species anomaly, but a fusion, the biological embodiment of two once-opposed civilizations now connected by choice chance and something neither war nor science had prepared for. The facility sensed it too. Glyphs shifted patterns on the walls, no longer red or defensive, but glowing with a strange golden-green hue. The architecture welcomed the signal, adapting its frequency. Even the air tasted different now, charged with ionic memory, and something older still, hope. Kael approached slowly, aware that each step toward her now carried more weight than any battlefield charge. She didn't move, just stood waiting, trusting. When he reached her, he rested his palm beside hers. The heat of her hand beneath the biosuit was startling. For a brief second, everything between them stilled, and in that pause, a message arrived. The chamber ceiling lit with a projection neither technological nor holographic in the traditional sense, but something else. An interface for the awakened. It spoke not in language, but in pure cognition. A being of light emerged, the Ascendant. Its form was vaguely humanoid, refracted through dozens of shifting lenses, appearing as different things to each viewer. To Kael, it looked like a soldier wrapped in nebulae. To Illyra, it resembled a priestess of her people's origin myths. To both, it felt like history staring back. You have passed the convergence threshold, the being intoned without sound. The resonance you carry is rare. Few ever survive the trials. Fewer still unify. Kael's hand tightened around Illyra's. "You were not meant to find each other," the Ascendant continued. "This was a containment world, a filter, a crucible designed to erase potential threats before they evolved. But you broke the design." Illyra straightened. Her voice, actual voice this time, rang like tempered steel. "Why us?" "Because you chose each other over doctrine," it replied. "Because you formed a bond not of protocol, but of trust, of instinct. And in doing so, you gave birth to a new equation." The walls around them changed again, revealing a galactic map. Dozens of red pulses began to glow in sequence, scattered across star systems both known and buried beneath legend. "This was only one node," said the Ascendant. "There are others, connected, waiting, some waking, some dying, and now they will see you." The weight of it settled like a cloak across Kael's shoulders. Not fear, not duty, but purpose. "And our child?" he asked. The Ascendant tilted its shifting face. "A bridge, a symbol, perhaps more. Its biology is beyond predictive simulation. It may unify systems, translate conflicts, stabilize core frequencies, or Alira pressed gaze unwavering, or rewrite the limits of sentient evolution itself." A pulse of golden light filled the room. The Ascendant faded, and with it, the chamber quieted once more. Kael exhaled. Alira stepped forward and rested her forehead lightly against his. The gesture was simple, ancient, human, but from her it felt like ceremony. Outside, the stars turned. 3 weeks later, a stealth transport bearing no insignia left Norith Prime's surface, guided by faint transgalactic echoes. Aboard it, 2 beings stood at the viewing port. One human, one Aryan, no longer enemies, no longer undefined. Kael Renner had removed his Helix Division badge. Alira Sen no longer wore the Dominion insignia. In its place, they bore only the resonance glyph and abstract spiral now etched on the skin just beneath the collarbone. A symbol not of faction, but of becoming. As the ship entered Lightfold, Kael rested a hand on the low curvature of Alira's stomach. Her eyes met his, soft, fierce, unbreakable. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Beyond the impossible, they had discovered something far more rare than victory: belonging. And in the quiet between stars, where war had once written its endless song, something new began to hum. The future. In the scorched silence of North Prime, a sniper and a survivor changed the trajectory of 2 civilizations. What began as an impossible shot became a shared heartbeat. Through battlefield's betrayal and the flicker of old machines awakening, Kael Renner and Alira Sen found something no algorithm could predict each other. Together they faced ancient traps designed to crush evolution. Together they shattered a filter meant to separate worthy from doomed. And together they forged a bond, not just of species, but of destiny. Their resonance became the key to rewriting survival legacy and the very limits of biology. And now, somewhere in the quiet between the stars, their child waits to be born, not just a hybrid, but a symbol of unity, of transformation, of what happens when even the universe must admit nothing is truly impossible. What do you think, Commanders? Would you risk the galaxy to save one life? Could a sniper's instinct become the spark that lights 1,000 systems? Let me know in the comments. Should Kael and Alira return in a sequel? What would you do with a resonance bond? What's your favorite impossible shot moment? Subscribe for more sci-fi storytelling, ancient aliens, hybrid warriors, and the war that began where love unexpectedly bloomed. Until next time, keep your eyes sharp, your instincts sharper, and remember, sometimes the most powerful weapon is connection.